Welcome to episode 3 of Chai TV. Hey guys, my name is Derek, and on this very rainy day, let's talk about what it's like to have owned a Tesla Model 3 for the last couple of months. I want to go through all the stuff that I thought was an issue, all the stuff that I didn't know was an issue, and just how good this car is overall and whether it's actually worthwhile getting this. So this is going to be like a fireside chat, so we're just going to sit here, shoot the breeze, grab your cup of tea or your other favorite beverage, and let's get on with it. Episode 3. I just had to get my cup of tea. It's not actually chai tea, but nevertheless. So first thing I want to say about this car is that I've owned 10 cars in the past, and I can truthfully say that this is the most pleasurable, most enjoyable, and the best performing car that I've ever owned by miles. Now a lot of people saying having a car that performs so well, that goes so fast, that accelerates so fast, and I'm talking about 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in like 4.5 seconds in the Model 3 performance. A lot of people come up with the argument that it's dangerous. Yes, if you drive like an absolute lunatic, you can go really fast in this car, but for people who drive normal, having that extra bit of acceleration, that extra power, can actually get you out of some tight spots. For example, when you're trying to get out of a side street, of an intersection where it's kind of difficult because there's so many cars going across. Stuff like having to overtake on single lane carriageways, highways, where you do need the acceleration, you do need the speed to be able to overtake without running risks of having a head on, because when you pull out and you don't have enough power to overtake the car you're trying to overtake and there's something coming straight at you, that's very dangerous. So having the power is very useful in that situation also. And it just drives smooth, there's no pollution emitted. I mean, I just hate it now when I smell the exhaust of other cars because mine doesn't produce any of those foul fumes. And one of the benefits of having an electric vehicle is that you don't have to go to the petrol station. One of my pet hates was driving around looking for a petrol station, having to queue up at a petrol station, having to pay ridiculous prices for the fuel. Sometimes you actually drive around a little bit because some of the petrol stations run out of the type of fuel you had. I used to fill up all my cars with premium unleaded because I always thought that was better for the car. And quite often you get to the station and those pumps are out of use. Not having to go to a petrol station, not even having to make an effort to drive your car out just to fill up the car and come home, the best. And the tech is far in advance of any other vehicles that I have ever driven. Having said that, I must say that some of the software is still a little bit glitchy, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Compared to, say, a polished product like an Apple iPhone or an iPad, the Tesla tech isn't quite up to that level. You do find yourself having to try and fiddle with a few things, and if you're not good with tech, that could be a little bit of a minor annoyance. There's some things that you can't do at certain times, and I will go through that also. Stuff like software updates. Bit of a nuisance in my opinion, very valuable, but the fact of having to do it the way Tesla does it, I find that a little bit irritating. But one of the things that I was always worried about before I ordered a Tesla was this whole range anxiety thing. Compared to some or most actually of the other EVs around, Tesla's range is much better. I think, to be honest, if you're living in a city area and driving mostly in the suburbs and cities, you'll have very little issue with charging your car and you'll have no problems with range anxiety. The only situation I can think of that could be a little bit dodgy is if you don't have access to a power point near your car. If you live in an apartment building where you're parked in a garage where there is no power source, that could be a little bit of an issue for you because yes, you can go to the superchargers. And the thing about supercharging is that they're super fast, as we know. Apparently they're not as good for your battery if you charge your car so quickly. The other things are supercharging is actually become increasingly more expensive. When I first ordered the Tesla Model 3, which was in February 2022, it was roughly, I think, 30-ish cents per kilowatt hour. Right now it's 69. It makes it not that much cheaper than fuel. And the other issue is you've got to find a supercharger. Now, the Tesla app's really good at this. It tells you where your closest 10 superchargers are and how many stalls are available. But there is potential that you have to wait. If you go to a busy urban center, I've actually found in my experience most of the urban places not so much of a deal, especially when you're not in the middle of the city. The one at Broadway seems to be full a lot. But when you're out in the suburbs, realistically, most people don't take their car to a supercharger if they can charge it at home. So you're probably only going to get people who are living in units, as I said, and people who don't have access to a power point near where they park their car at home. But when you're out traveling, when you're in the rural or regional areas, some of those superchargers get quite busy. The one that we've been to a couple of times, which is in Goulburn, is actually quite busy, and you can compare the ones in New South Wales to those in the US. Like in California, we have like 4 to 8 stalls in general. The ones in the US are like 10, 12, 20, and I guess it's based on demand. And right now, it is quite possible during holiday periods and during rush hour that you may have to wait for a supercharger. And this is before Tesla's actually opened up supercharging to non-Tesla electric vehicles. So I hate to see what happens when other brands can make use of the Tesla superchargers. I have so far not tried the non-Tesla chargers. I've not tried the NRMA ones. I've not tried the ChargeFox ones. I've not tried any of the other destination chargers. Theoretically, with your Tesla, you can charge your car in any of those. Non-Tesla EVs right now can only use non-Tesla superchargers. So that's going to be all a bit sort of questionable in the future. Hopefully they'll increase the infrastructure, build more superchargers, build more other EV chargers to make that less of an issue. But right now, I must say, again, if you live in a city area and you have means of charging your car at home, range anxiety in general is not an issue. I get probably 25% charge overnight if I plug my car into a standard power point, which is fine because my habit is probably charging my car every second day. I drive about 60 kilometers a day. By the end of 2 days, my charge has gone from 90%, which is what I charge it up to unless I travel. Goes down to about 65%, and I can actually top it up overnight, no issues whatsoever. And I find that a really simple routine for me, and it works really well. When you travel outside of your town and when range is going to be an issue, you just got to have to plan ahead. You have to be prepared that you might have to wait at superchargers. You don't take the risk of running the car right down to like 5%. When I get to a supercharger, and for example, if it says you need to charge it up to 55% to get to your destination, I normally give it another 10%. Just so that you can be sure in case you're stuck in traffic, in case something goes wrong, you have to take a detour or something like that. You'll make sure you have enough charge. But as long as you plan your trip out, and as long as you're prepared to wait at a supercharger, range anxiety really shouldn't be much of an issue. There aren't really that many places in New South Wales that you can't get to in terms of not being able to find charging if you plan ahead. So I think that's one of the things that you're just going to have to relax. The long range is great because, for example, when I go from our house in Sydney down to Cooma, which is about 420 kilometers, you theoretically could get there on one charge if you really pushed it. You charge it up to 100% and you let it run down to like 5, but I don't take that risk. You stop in Goulburn, have some lunch, heaps of charge left, not a problem whatsoever. But right now, a long range Tesla Model 3, which is new, with no history of battery degradation. So this is the other thing. If you're planning on keeping your car for 5, 6, 7 years, if you lose 10 or 20% of your battery, range could be an issue, but right now it isn't. And what about the lack of a spare tyre? Well, so far, touch wood, hasn't been an issue for me. I have a portable tyre pump in my car in case the pressures go down. You can get those ones where you can insert sealant into the tyre and all that kind of stuff. And Tesla, in fact, makes one. But the thing is, once you do that, you wreck the tyre. So normally if you get a puncture, they can repair it at like a tyre place. It's like $40. But if you insert that sealant in, yes, it'll get you where you want to go, but the tyre's no longer repairable, so that's at least $400 down the toilet. Is the Model 3 comfortable to sit in? In my opinion, yes. It is much lower, so if you're used to sitting in an SUV or something, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to because it is quite low. I find that there's loads of space. I don't sit in the back, but I found that there's loads of space. The panoramic glass roof is great, except when it gets hot. And you'll see in one of my previous videos that we've actually got sunshades for the panoramic glass roof because it's just simply way too hot. You don't want to damage the interior by having it constantly exposed to the sun, especially if you park outside. And in the hotter months, you don't want to risk getting burned. That's why we put the roof shade on, and so far it's worked fine. It doesn't make your car feel any more claustrophobic. It just makes it feel like a normal sedan, really. Yes, the car is quite comfortable. In terms of the low ride, you just got to be a little bit careful because it will scrape on really steep curbs. So that's one thing you'll be really careful of. You make sure your tires are well inflated. You make sure you go over these curbs really slowly because you don't want to keep scraping the bottom of your car. And it is definitely a possibility with this low clearance of this car. And in terms of the technology, how is it? Well, most of the time it works fine. Just like anything else, iPhone, iPad, occasionally I just reboot it. And you reboot it by pressing the two buttons on the steering wheel, and any sort of slowness, any lagginess, any bugs will generally be ironed out by just doing a soft reset like that. I've found that when I've played games on it, occasionally the games crash, and the only way you can reset it is to actually reset the system, which is no big deal. It's obviously not something you do while you're driving, but once you stop, it takes about a minute and everything just comes back to normal. In terms of connectivity, occasionally the LTE of the car drops out for a couple of minutes and it takes a bit of time. Your Bluetooth connection to your phone drops out occasionally, so it's all occasionally, it kind of gets a little bit glitchy. But in general, the connectivity is really good. Remembering, as I mentioned in the previous video, Apple CarPlay does not work. If you're using stuff that normally you would be quite used to using, for example, you can't control Apple Music using the touchscreen on your Tesla. You can only control it from your phone. It's hard to use stuff like Waze and other third-party software because there's no app for it. If you're a Spotify user, then you're set because there's a Spotify app on the Tesla. But as I said, if you use something like Apple Music, it doesn't work and you're going to have to use it from your phone, and because you can't touch your phone, you're going to have to use Siri. And speaking of Siri, the voice recognition of the Tesla Model 3 is nowhere near as good as Siri. So whenever you're dictating messages using the voice recognition, I find that half of my messages are wrong. That gets a bit annoying because you have to keep repeating yourself. But yes, Siri is definitely much more accurate than the Tesla Model 3 voice recognition, especially when it comes to sending text messages. It works fine when you want to change the temperature of your air conditioning and stuff like that. But in terms of messages, especially when you either speak long phrases or if you have a little bit of an accent, that could be a problem. And speaking of air conditioning, the vents are weird. You adjust everything obviously through the touchscreen, but I find that the air conditioning is not quite as strong as some of the other cars, and that's something you got to get used to. You can obviously precondition your car before you go in, and that's one of the things about these EVs is you can use your phone, sit in your lounge room in the comfort of your air conditioning or your heating, and actually have the car warm itself up or cool itself down before you get in. And now when it comes to software updates themselves, I find the automatic notification that there is a new update a little bit hit and miss. You can easily go through it by going to the menu and looking for software and looking for updates. Now just remember, Tesla only updates once a day. So if you checked within the last 24 hours, it's not going to allow you to check again. In terms of the software updates, they do download quite quickly. And what I've been doing is because where I park, I don't have access to Wi-Fi, so I use my phone as a hotspot and it works fine. It can be a bit slow. One of the things that are a little bit annoying about the software update, or there's a few things, but one of them is it can kind of update without a Wi-Fi connection, but it's super slow. And I did it once at work in the car park and had no Wi-Fi. I accidentally pressed a button and it took like 7 hours to download, and I was freaking out because I thought the battery was going to run out, but it didn't. The other thing is, once the software download starts, at this point I don't believe there's any way you can stop it or pause it, and that is a huge nuisance in my opinion. I understand that when you're installing it, the card you can't use, and it says up to a couple of hours, but it's usually less than 30 minutes. So you just got to plan it that you just do it once you get home, knowing you're not going to use your car, or just do it overnight. But in terms of the actual download, the fact that you can't pause it, and the fact that sometimes it's kind of downloads to a certain amount, you see the progress bar go across and it just stops. And you don't know whether it's going to resume, you don't know whether you've lost the connectivity, you just sit there and eventually it just resumes. But there's no spinning wheel, there's nothing. So that's a bit disconcerting, and if you're used to updates where the progress bar continues to move and it gives you feedback as to how it's going, you're going to be a little bit disappointed with the Tesla software updates at this point. The windscreen wipers, I don't like them. They're a bit hit and miss, but with all rain sensing windscreen wipers, I find them to be a little bit hit and miss. And that's no different with the Tesla ones. In terms of some of the other power functions, the power windows work really well. Just remember the back ones only come halfway down, which will freak you out initially because they think there's something faulty about them, but they actually only do come halfway down. And the kiddies will complain in the back, but it is what it is. In terms of space in the boot, there's quite a deep space. I mean, it looks like there isn't much. You can't store anything too tall, but it does go back quite deep. And if you combine that and the front, I have found that you can probably get away with using a Tesla Model 3 on a road trip with 2 adults, 2 kids and a dog, and you can still kind of fit everything in without crowding the cabin so badly that there's nowhere for the kids to move in the back. It surprised me a little bit. Obviously, the Model Y is going to be a little bit bigger, but your trade-off with the Model Y for a bigger SUV-like car is that it's more expensive, the performance is a little bit less, but you get more room. So you've got to decide which one is right for you. The included apps on the Tesla touchscreen, pretty rudimentary. There are some games which are fun to play. Watching movies, playing games in your Tesla does not drain the battery as much as I feared. You know, you watch an hour of your iPad or your phone and it drops 10%, but it's negligible. You like less than 1%. So that's not an issue at all. As I said, the actual apps are a bit rudimentary. You get like tuned in, you get like the radio. In terms of Spotify, you can't use a free account. Just remember, you have to have a paid account to be able to use Spotify on your Tesla, because I have a free account for Spotify, and when you try and put in the password and the username, it always says unavailable, try again later. So there is a thing where you must have the paid version of Spotify to use the Spotify app on your Tesla touchscreen. Doesn't mean you can't use it from your iPhone and then you just do it connected via Bluetooth, but if you use the app, it doesn't work. Similarly, you can play Apple Podcasts or whatever, but you're just going to have to do it all from your phone and not from the car. A lot of the features on the Tesla touchscreen, it requires the connectivity bundle, which is around about $10 in Australia, and you need to get that to get your road traffic and some of the other apps to work. So just budget that in, that every year it's going to be about $120. You do get unlimited internet, so you can watch YouTube, you can use Netflix and stuff without having to hotspot it to your phone when you have the connectivity. But remember, you really do need that, and you can't really skimp on that. In terms of the enhanced autopilot and the full self-driving, I haven't got either of those things. Would I, even if I had the money, invest in those things? Well, here's my 2 cents. The standard basic autopilot that you get with the car takes you about a week, I'd say, to get used to the fact that you can let go of the wheel and the car doesn't run into a wall. But once you get that, it works quite well within the limits of what it's meant to do. Remember, with basic autopilot, it's kind of like adaptive cruise control. You set it at a speed, it follows whatever that speed is. If the car in front of you slows down, you'll slow down and it keeps the same distance. It will keep you in the lane, which is awesome. And it does really reduce the amount of fatigue when you're driving day to day, whether it's urban or whether it's on a highway. It works really well. But remember, with basic autopilot, it doesn't stop for traffic lights. And 2 is, if you're in a 1-lane carriage each way sort of highway, it doesn't allow you to use that function when you exceed the speed limit. So just assuming you're driving down, for example, the Monaro Highway, the speed limit there is 100, you've got the basic autopilot on, you can't dial that up even to 102. It just doesn't let you. But when there's 2 lanes, it allows you to do that. Weird, but that's one of the things that you just need to know about. The other thing that I found a little bit dodgy with the basic autopilot is, if you're going straight down a highway and there's some traffic that comes across, if the car comes out and you're going this way, even if you're ages away from it, the car freaks out and slams the brakes on because it thinks you're going to T-bone this car. So that's one scenario where I would strongly suggest that you turn off the autopilot. With this basic autopilot, you're going to have to turn it on and off. When you change lanes to overtake, you're going to have to turn it off. And when you obviously get to a traffic light, you're going to have to turn it off. So basically, it's not as good as it is, but it does what it does. The enhanced autopilot adds a few extra things for $5,000. It allows you to change lanes while leaving the autopilot on. I don't know if it's worth it. I'll consider it. But the full self-driving, I just don't know if I can trust the car to do all the driving for me. For $10,000, that is a lot of money. And bear in mind that if you ever sell your car, all these packages do not come with you in terms of staying on your account. It's specific to the vehicle. So if you were to buy a Model 3 right now and spend $10,000 on the full self-driving, you decide next year you want to upgrade to the Model S, you don't get to keep that full self-driving into the Model S, and you have to actually buy a new package, which is something you need to think about if you're not the type of person who's likely to keep the car for a long time. So that's pretty much it from what I can think about on this Fireside Chat. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other questions you want to ask about the Tesla Model 3 before you hit the buy button. Remember, the time lag is roughly somewhere between 6 and 12 months, so you've got a lot of time to stew over all these things. I found that if I hadn't known some of this information that I've mentioned in this video before I bought the car, I'd be a little bit more relaxed and I'd know a little bit more about what to expect when I got the car. But if you were like me and just bought it online without ever test driving this car, I think that you would still love this car very much, because there's no glaringly obvious flaw that I can mention. All those issues that I mentioned kind of are okay. As I said, I don't know about the no spare tire thing. That's something still brings me a little bit of anxiety. But the range thing, I think it's not a huge issue right now. Some of the software glitches, as long as you're kind of okay with tech As long as you're okay with fiddling with your smartphone or your tablet and adjusting a few things, reinstalling some things, resetting a few things, I don't think that that's going to be a major issue at all. The difference between an EV and a petrol car, or an ICE, which is called an internal combustion engine car, is that when you go on trips, you have to just to plan it a bit. For example, if you're used to driving around and the car being like 50%, if you don't want to be in a situation where you have a surprise road trip tomorrow morning and you're not prepared, because in a previous ICE car, if you're half empty, you could just drive to the petrol station and fill up, and it'll take you 5 minutes. But if you're 50% and you just decided all of a sudden that you must go on a trip that's 400 kilometers and you want to charge your car to 90 to 100%, if you're at home, you've got no hope because it's, as I said, 2.5% an hour. You'd have to find a supercharger and it'll probably still take around 45 minutes to get from 50 to 100. So you just got to have to plan ahead. Once you plan ahead and you know where you're going, you route so that you know where the superchargers or other chargers are, it shouldn't be an issue. If you're going to a destination where you're hiring an Airbnb or something, it would be useful to find out what sort of charges are there around there, whether you can actually charge at the Airbnb, or if you're staying in a hotel where you can charge in the car park, or whether there's a supercharger nearby. With a bit of planning, driving an EV is pleasurable, it's fun, and it goes super fast, and I love it. So that's it for this episode 3 of Chai TV. Hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to seeing you next time on another video. Have a great day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.